The doors closed behind me, with a sound like a mountain sitting down. I had walked into rooms before that wanted me dead. This was the first one built to make me feel like I had already lost. The ceiling went up and up until it simply stopped being a ceiling and became dark. No lights up there, just black, swallowing the tops of pillars that were each as wide as a house. My name is Elias Vance. I am 63 years old. I have spent 40 of those years sitting across tables from people who hated me, and I have never once raised my voice. I was going to need every bit of that today. The Koradi Imperium had sent a ship to collect me, not invite, collect. The ship was the size of a small city, and they parked it over our station like a fist held above a face. The message had been short: come alone, bring no fleet, bring no weapons, just come. So I came. The walk to the Grand Conclave was long on purpose. Everything here was on purpose. The corridor was built so that a person had to look up to see where they were going, and looking up made you feel small, and feeling small was the point. I had read the reports. I knew the trick. Knowing the trick did not make my neck hurt any less. I counted the steps instead. It was a habit. 61 steps to the door. An old habit, one I had carried for 5 years now, ever since a different corridor, a worse one, where counting steps was the only thing that kept me from falling apart. I did not think about that corridor, not here, not now. The conclave hall opened in front of me, and I stopped counting. There were hundreds of them. The Koradi, tall, golden, beautiful in the cold way a knife is beautiful. They sat in rings that climbed up the walls, ring above ring, all of them looking down at the small human standing alone on the floor. The air smelled like metal and something sweet underneath, like flowers left too long in a vase. At the center on a raised seat sat the one they called the speaker. He was the tallest of them, 8 feet, maybe more. His skin caught the light like polished brass. When he moved, the whole room seemed to lean toward him. He looked at me the way you look at a problem you already know how to solve. Human, he said. The word came to me twice, once in his own chiming language and once in flat translation a half-second behind, like an echo that had learned to speak. You stand before the Grand Conclave of the Koradi Imperium. Do you understand the honor of this? I understand the length of the walk, I said. A ripple went through the rings. Not laughter, something colder. Surprise, maybe, that the small thing on the floor had a voice. The speaker did not blink. I am not sure the Koradi blink at all. Then I will not waste the breath of this conclave, he said. Your species has settled the Helios corridor, 11 worlds. The corridor belongs to the Imperium. It has always belonged to the Imperium. You will leave it, all of it. You will leave it within 30 days or the Imperium will remove you. He let that word sit. Remove. The translation gave it no weight at all, which somehow made it heavier. And when I say remove, he went on, I want you to understand the scale. We do not negotiate twice. We do not ask twice. There are 40,000 ships in the fleet that brought me here. You have, by our count, 1,100. So this is not a threat, ambassador. A threat suggests you have a choice. This is simply the future told to you in advance as a kindness. The rings of golden faces watched me. I felt their certainty press down on me like the dark in the ceiling. I want to tell you that I felt brave. I did not. My heart was going hard and fast, and my hands wanted to shake, and there was a cold feeling spreading up from my stomach that I knew very well. I had felt it in waiting rooms. I had felt it standing outside a door I did not want to open 5 years ago in that other corridor. But I had learned something in those rooms. I had learned that fear is loud and certainty is quiet, and that a quiet thing in a loud room makes everyone lean in to listen. So I did not answer him right away. Instead, I crouched down, slow because my knees are 63 years old, and I set my travel bag on the floor of the Grand Conclave of the Koradi Imperium. I opened it. The sound of the zipper was the only sound in that enormous room, and somehow it filled the whole space. I took out a thermos, It was dented on one side. My granddaughter had dropped it down a flight of stairs the week before, and I had not had the heart to replace it, because she had cried about it, and then we had both laughed. The dent was shaped a little like a smile if you looked at it right. I unscrewed the cap. Steam came up, thin and white, catching the light. The smell of tea drifted out into a room that smelled like metal and old flowers. I looked up at the speaker, 8 feet of golden empire on his raised seat, and at the hundreds of faces watching me, and I asked the question I had walked 61 steps to ask. Would anyone like some tea? The silence that followed was a beautiful thing. I have spent 40 years learning to read silences the way a sailor reads water, and this one told me everything. It told me they had prepared for begging. They had prepared for anger. They had prepared for a small human to shout, or weep, or fall to his knees and offer them anything to spare his people. They had not prepared for tea. The speaker's golden face did something it had not done since I walked in. It moved, just slightly, a tightening around the eyes there and gone. You mock the conclave, he said. No, I said. I poured a little tea into the cap which doubles as a cup and the steam curled up between us. I have been traveling for 9 days to get here. I am tired and I am old and the walk was very long. I would like some tea. It seemed rude not to offer. You stand at the edge of the destruction of your species, the speaker said, and now there was something new in his voice. Not anger, confusion. He did not understand the thing in front of him, and the Koradi I would learn do not like things they do not understand. Your 11 worlds, your billions of people, and you speak of tea. I heard you the first time, I said. I took a sip. It was good tea. My daughter used to make it this way, strong, a little too much honey. I do not think about her, but I drink her tea. 40,000 ships, 30 days, I was listening. I always listen. It is the only thing I am truly good at. I screwed the cap back onto the thermos, slow, deliberate, and I straightened up to my full height, which against a Koradi is not very impressive at all. You have told me your numbers, I said. May I ask you about mine? The speaker leaned back in his seat. He thought he was about to enjoy this. He thought a small, broken old man was about to plead, and that he would get to watch. Speak, he said. And in the rings above us, hundreds of golden faces leaned in to hear what the tea-drinking human had to say. I let the quiet stretch one moment longer. I have found that the moment before you speak is often worth more than the words themselves. You said the Helios corridor has always belonged to the Imperium, I said. I want to make sure I have the facts right because facts matter to me. May I tell you what I know, and you can correct me where I am wrong? The speaker made a small gesture with one long hand. Permission, given the way a king gives a coin to a beggar. The Helios corridor is 11 worlds, I said. But the corridor does not float in empty space. It sits between 3 other regions. To the spinward side, the Velith reach. To the trailing side, the domains of Anu. And below, the spindle worlds, where, if I am not mistaken, the Imperium grows a great deal of its food and mines a great deal of its metal. A different kind of silence began to settle over the room. I felt it more than heard it. It was the silence of people who have realized that the small thing on the floor knows the layout of their house. The Velith reach, I went on gently like I was reminding an old friend of a shared memory. The domains of Anu, the spindle worlds. The Imperium rules all 3, does it not? Rules them the way you would like to rule us. Took them long ago. They are vassals now. They send you grain. They send you metal. They send you soldiers when you ask. You are well read, the speaker said. His voice was careful now. The amusement was draining out of it. I read everything, I said. It is the second thing I am good at, listening and reading. I am not good at fighting. My people are not good at fighting. I will tell you that for free because you already know it. 1,100 ships against 40,000. We are catastrophically bad at the kind of war you are describing. I picked up my bag. I held it against my chest like a man holds something he loves. "But here is the thing about being bad at one thing," I said. "It forces you to get very, very good at another." I looked up past the speaker, into the rings, finding the faces that had stopped looking certain. "You have given me 30 days, I said. "But before you decide what happens on day 30, I think there is something you should know about what has been happening in the spindle worlds for the last 40 days. The speaker went very still. And I knew then that the room was mine. Not one, not yet, but mine to lose now, which is a different thing entirely. The fear was still there in my stomach, cold and patient, but under it steadier was the thing I had come here carrying. Not courage. Courage is loud. This was the quiet thing, the certain thing. I had not come to beg. I had come to deliver a weather report. "Sit if you like," I told the speaker of the grand conclave of the Korati Imperium, and the words felt strange and enormous in my mouth. "This will take a few minutes, and it is going to change everything you thought you knew when you woke up this morning." He did not sit. But he did not speak either. And in the dark above us, where the ceiling stopped being a ceiling, I heard, very faintly, the rustle of hundreds of beings leaning forward to listen to a tired old man with a dented thermos. I took one more sip of my daughter's tea. Then I began. The first thing I told them was about a freighter. Not a warship, a freighter. An ugly, slow, ordinary cargo hauler named the Goldcrest, captained by a woman from Earth named Margaret Doyle, who had 3 children and a bad knee and absolutely no interest in war. 81 days ago, I said, the Goldcrest broke down near a spindle world called Tarson, a fuel leak, nothing dramatic, the kind of thing that happens to old ships run by tired people. Captain Doyle sent out a call for help. I watched the speaker's face as I spoke. "Now the spindle worlds belong to you," I said. "So when a human ship calls for help over a spindle world, the smart thing, the safe thing, is to wait for the Imperium to decide whether to let it die." "Yes." "That is the law," the speaker said. "It is your law," I agreed. But the people of Tarson did not wait for the Imperium to decide. They sent up 3 tugs and a medical shuttle, and they fixed the Goldcrest, and they fed Captain Doyle and her crew, and they sent them home. They did this in 11 hours. They did not ask permission. Do you know why? The speaker said nothing. "Because they were hungry," I said. "Because the grain they grow goes to you, and what is left over is not enough, and they remembered that 2 years ago when the Tarson harvest failed, it was a human relief convoy that fed their children. Not the Imperium, us. The bad at fighting, tea-drinking, catastrophically soft humans. We showed up, with food. And we did not ask for the corridor in return. We did not ask for anything." I let that sit. "You see," I said, and I said it kindly, because I meant it kindly. "While you were counting your 40,000 ships, we were doing the only thing we are actually good at." I looked around the rings of golden faces, the vassals' masters, the rulers of 3 stolen regions, and I told them the truth that had brought me all this way. We were making friends with everyone you ever stepped on. The hall was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. And somewhere in the upper rings, in the dark, one golden voice that did not belong to the speaker said, very softly, a single word in a language the translation did not bother to carry. "But I have a good ear." It sounded a great deal like fear. The speaker recovered fast. I will give him that. A lesser leader would have shouted. He simply lifted one hand, and the murmuring in the ring stopped at once. "A broken freighter," he said. "A bowl of grain. You think this frightens the Imperium. You think kindness is a fleet." "No," I said. "Kindness is not a fleet. Kindness is something much harder to defend against. A fleet you can see coming. A fleet you can count. You are very good at counting, speaker. 40,000 ships. 1100, 30 days. You like numbers because numbers can be controlled." I set my bag down again. My knees thanked me. but you cannot count how many times a person remembers who fed them, I said. You cannot put a number on the moment a vassal looks at the empire that takes their grain, and then looks at the strangers who gave it freely, and begins, very quietly in a room where no one can hear, to wonder. Wonder what? The speaker said, and I think he asked before he could stop himself. I smiled. It was not a victory smile. It was the smile of a tired man who has carried something heavy for a long way and is finally setting it down. Wonder, I said, what would happen if they simply stopped sending you their grain? The dent in my thermos caught the light. It looked like a smile, too. Now, I said, let me tell you about the second freighter, and the third, and the harbor master on Velith Prime, and the metal that has, very recently, stopped arriving on schedule, and the reason for that has nothing at all to do with 1,100 ships. I picked the thermos back up. We are going to be here a while, I said. It is a good thing I brought tea. And the grand conclave of the Korati Imperium, 40,000 ships at its back and an empire under its feet, sat in silence and listened to a human speak. I had 30 days. I would not need all of them. The speaker held up his hand again, and this time it was not to silence the room. It was to stop me. You speak of grain, he said, of metal, of freighters that break down and strangers who are kind. Pretty stories, ambassador, but the Imperium does not run on grain alone, it runs on fear. The vassals send their tribute because they have seen what happens to worlds that do not. So tell me how your kindness stands against a memory of fire. It was a good question. It was, in fact, the only question that mattered, and I respected him for asking it instead of pretending it did not exist. So I told him the truth. It does not, I said, not by itself. Fear is strong. Fear is older than kindness, and it works faster and it never gets tired. You are right about that. If kindness were all I had, I would not have wasted 9 days flying here. I would have stayed home and held my granddaughter and waited for your fire. That surprised him, I could see it. He had expected me to argue. But fear has one weakness, I went on. It only works when the thing you fear is the strongest thing in the room. The moment a frightened person looks around and sees something stronger than the thing that frightens them, the fear does not vanish. It changes direction. It turns and points at you. I let the thermos rest in my hands. The warmth of it was steadying. For 1,000 years, I said, the Imperium was the strongest thing in every room. So the vassals were afraid of you, and only you and your fear held them like a closed fist. That worked. It worked beautifully. I am not here to insult your history. It is a remarkable thing you built. But, the speaker said, because he was not a stupid being, and he could hear the shape of the word coming. But I agreed, you are no longer the only strong thing in the room. And you did not notice when that changed, because you were busy counting ships. I looked up into the rings again, and I raised my voice just slightly, not to shout, never to shout, but so that the faces in the dark at the top could hear me clearly. There is a world called Eshen, I said. It belongs to the domains of Anu, which belong to you. 4 years ago, a sickness came to Eshen. It moved through the children first. It was the kind of sickness that empties a school in a season. The people of Eshen begged the Imperium for help, for medicine, for anything. I paused. The Imperium sent a tax collector, I said, on schedule, to make sure the tribute still came, even from a dying world. The silence in the hall had a new quality now. It was not the silence of beings who were entertained. It was the silence of beings who recognized the story, because some of them had been there, and some of them had signed the order. Human research ship was passing through, I said. Just passing through. A small vessel, a science crew led by a doctor named Priya Anand. She was not supposed to stop. Stopping was against your law. She stopped anyway. She spent 4 months on Eshen. She did not have the right medicine, so she and her crew made it, working in a tent, sleeping 3 hours a night, burying the ones they could not save and weeping over every single grave because that is the foolish, soft, catastrophically human thing to do. I had to stop for a moment. My own voice had gone rough. I did not plan that. But Priya Anand was real, and the graves were real, and I had read her report, and a man does not read a report like that and stay made of stone. I took a sip of tea. It had gone lukewarm. I drank it anyway. She saved the world, I said quietly. Most of it, the children mostly. And then she got back in her little ship and flew away and asked for nothing. No tribute, no thanks, no corridor, she just left. I looked at the speaker. The people of Eshin named a moon after her, I said. Did you know that? You did not because you do not listen to the domains of Anu, you only count them. But they named a moon after a human doctor, and every night when that moon rises, a whole world looks up and remembers who came when they were dying. And it was not you. I let those last 4 words fall into the room one at a time, like stones into a deep well, and I listened to them land. The speaker said nothing. For the first time since I had walked in, he had nothing to say. So I kept going, because in a negotiation, the silence of the other side is an open door, and a man who knows his business walks through open doors. Here is what fear cannot survive, I said. Fear cannot survive gratitude. When a frightened vassal looks at you, they see fire. But when that same vassal looks up at a moon named for a human, they see a choice. And a vassal who knows they have a choice is no longer a vassal. They are simply a person who has not decided yet which way to jump. I set my empty thermos down on the floor, capped it, and folded my hands. You have many vassals, speaker, I said, and lately a great many of them have been looking at the sky. A voice came from the rings, not the speakers. It came from high up and to the left, from a Korati I could not see clearly, only a shape of gold against the dark. The voice was older than the speakers, slower, and the translation gave it a dry, careful weight. You imply that our vassals would turn, the old voice said, on the word of a tea seller. This is a great deal of confidence for 1,100 ships. I turned toward the voice. I always turn toward the voice that asks the real question, because that is the voice that is actually thinking. May I know who I am speaking with? I asked. A pause. Then, I am Loremaster Veth. I keep the histories of the Imperium. I have kept them for 300 of your years. I have read the rise and the end of 14 empires human. Yours will be the 15th I record, unless you say something in the next few moments that surprises me. I liked him at once. There is a particular kind of honesty in a man who has read enough history to know how it usually ends. Loremaster Veth, I said, I am not asking you to take it on my word. I would not insult a historian by asking him to take anything on faith. I am asking you to check your own records. The grain shipments from the spindle worlds. Pull the numbers for the last 40 days, not the numbers your tax collectors report up the chain. The real numbers, the ones at the docks. There was a long quiet. I imagined, somewhere in that vast golden room, a being reaching for a record-keeping device with a hand that had grown, just slightly less certain. Why 40 days? Loremaster Veth said. It was not quite a question. It was a man checking the edge of a cliff before he looked over it. Because 40 days ago, I said, every human relief world in 3 regions received the same quiet message from us. Not an order. We do not give orders. A suggestion. We suggested that they might, if they wished, begin offering the vassal worlds a better price for grain and metal than the Imperium pays them in scraps. We suggested they might offer to buy what the vassals grow, fairly, in the open, like people. And we suggested they might mention, only if asked, that the humans have never once burned a world that traded with them freely. I shrugged, an old man's small shrug. We did not tell the vassals to stop sending you tribute, I said. We would never be so rude. We simply gave them somewhere else to send it. And then we waited. Because the one thing we humans are truly, deeply, almost embarrassingly good at is waiting for the right moment and then showing up. The silence stretched, and then Loremaster Veth made a sound. A low sound, somewhere between a sigh and a groan, the sound a man makes when he looks at a number he was hoping not to see. "The spindle grain shipments," he said slowly, "are down by a third." The whole hall moved at once. A wind of murmuring swept through the rings. "In 40 days, Veth went on, and his old voice had lost its dryness now, by a third, and the Velith metal. The metal is down by nearly half. I had assumed it was an error, a bad season, a clerical fault." He paused. "I did not assume it was a human." The speaker rose from his seat. 8 feet of golden empire standing, and for the first time I saw something in his posture that was not certainty. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking up at his own loremaster, at the rings of faces that were no longer looking down at the small human, but had turned, every one of them, to look at each other. "Numbers can be corrected," the speaker said, but his voice had changed, and everyone in that room heard it change. "A shortfall can be answered. We have 40,000 ships. We will go to the spindle worlds and we will remind them why the grain flows." And there it was, the moment I had flown 9 days to reach, the moment the empire reached by old habit for the fist. I did not let my face show anything, but inside something settled into place, the way a key settles into a lock. "You could do that," I said. "You could take your 40,000 ships to the spindle worlds and remind them to be afraid. It would work for a while. Fear always works for a while." I picked up my bag. I unzipped it. The sound filled the room again, and every golden face turned back to the small thing on the floor. "But let me ask you a question first," I said, "and then I will tell you about the harbor master on Velith Prime, because I promised I would, and I keep my promises. It is a short question, speaker, and I would like you to think before you answer it, because your whole empire is balanced on it, whether you knew that this morning or not." I straightened up. "If you send 40,000 ships to the spindle worlds to frighten them back into line," I said, "who, exactly, is feeding your home worlds while those ships are gone? And who is mining your metal? And who is watching the domains of Anu, where a doctor's moon rises every night? And who is watching the Velith Reach, where the harbor master, a man named Corin Hale, has not sent the Imperium a single shipment in 9 days, and has not been punished for it, because the ship you would send to punish him is, at this very moment, parked over my station, threatening me?" The speaker stared at me. "You moved your whole fleet to threaten one old man," I said very gently, "and you left the back door of your empire wide open. I did not do that. You did that. I simply waited until you had done it, and then I came to tell you." The hall had gone completely silent, not the silence of fear now, the silence of a great many beings doing arithmetic at the same time and not liking the answer. Loremaster Veth spoke into that silence, and his old voice was almost gentle. "He is correct, speaker," Veth said. "The fleet is here, it is not there. It cannot be both." The speaker turned slowly to face me, and when he spoke, the chime had gone out of his voice. What was left was just a tired ruler looking at a map he had read wrong. "Who are you?" he said. "Truly, no ambassador speaks this way." I thought about lying. I am good at it when I have to be, but I had not come all this way to lie. "I am a man who lost someone once," I said, "because 2 governments were so busy threatening each other that they would not share the one thing that could have saved her. I watched it happen. I counted the steps in the corridor outside her room because counting was the only thing I could control. I held up the dented thermos. I learned that day that the loudest people in the room are almost never the strongest, and I decided that for the rest of my life I would be the quiet one, the one who listens, the one who waits, the one who shows up. I looked around the rings one last time. "You threatened my people with war this morning," I said, "and I have not raised my voice once. Has anyone noticed that? You came with 40,000 ships and I came with a thermos, and right now in this room, you are the one who is afraid." No one spoke. So I sat down, cross-legged, on the floor of the grand conclave of the Korati Imperium, like a man settling in by a fire. "Now," I said, "Corin Hale, the harbor master of Velith Prime, let me tell you what he did 9 days ago and why it is the most important thing that has happened to your empire in 1,000 years. And then, Speaker, we are going to talk about the Helios Corridor, properly, as people, because I think by the time I am finished you are going to want to." And the empire that had come to threaten war leaned in to listen to a man with an empty thermos and a dent shaped like a smile. Corin Hale was not a hero. I want to be clear about that because the story has been told wrong already, even in the few days since it happened, and the wrong version makes him brave. He was not brave. He was tired and he was angry, and he was a middle-aged man with a sore back who had simply, finally, had enough. He ran the great trade harbor on Velith Prime, the largest port in the whole Velith Reach. Every shipment of metal that the Reach owed the Imperium passed across his desk. For 30 years, he had stamped the forms and loaded the ships and sent the metal away, and watched his own people go without, because the law said the Imperium ate first. 9 days ago, a human ship came into his harbor. A trader. Just a trader, carrying medicine and seed and tools, captained by a young woman named Freya Lindqvist, who had no idea she was about to change history and would have been horrified to hear it. She offered Corin Hale a fair price for Velith metal, open, honest. More than the Imperium had ever paid, which was nothing, because the Imperium does not pay, it takes. And Corin Hale, harbor master of Velith Prime, looked at the forms on his desk, and looked at the human trader, and looked out the window at his own children. And he did a thing no one in the Velith Reach had done in 1,000 years. He said no to the Imperium. He held back the metal. He sold a share of it to Freya Lindqvist instead, fairly in the open, and he used what she paid him to buy food and medicine for his own city. And then he waited to be punished. The punishment did not come. It did not come because the fleet that should have brought it was, at that exact moment, being loaded for a long journey to threaten a small human station. And one old human ambassador, 63 years old, who had read a report about a doctor and a moon and had begun, very quietly, to count. "You see," I told the speaker, "Corin Hale was not strong. He was just the first. And the thing about the first one, Speaker, the thing your histories will tell you if you ask the loremaster, is that the first one is never the dangerous one. The first one is only the test. The dangerous ones are the 10,000 who are watching to see what happens to the first one." I let that settle. "Right now," I said, 10,000 harbor masters across 3 regions are watching Corin Hale. They are watching to see if the Imperium comes for him. And every day that you do not, every single day, another one of them looks at a human trader and looks at his own hungry children and begins to do the arithmetic that you taught me to respect. Your arithmetic. The arithmetic of fear. Except now the fear is pointing the wrong way. The speaker sank slowly back into his seat. "You did all this," he said, "with kindness and patience and a thermos." "No," I said. "I did all this by listening for years while you were counting. You told me at the start that this was not a threat, that it was simply the future, told to me in advance, as a kindness." I smiled, and this time it was almost a sad smile because I had come to feel a strange respect for him. "Let me return the kindness, Speaker. Let me tell you your future in advance. If you send the fleet to the Spindle Worlds, your home worlds starve. If you keep the fleet here to threaten me, the vassals slip away one harbor master at a time. If you go home to defend your center, you abandon the edge. There is no number you can write, no ship you can move that solves all 3 at once." I checked. I am very good at checking. I leaned forward. "The fist only works when it can be everywhere," I said. "And you have just learned this morning, in front of your whole conclave, that it cannot." Loremaster Veth spoke from the dark above. He has read us correctly, speaker, the old historian said, and there was something almost like wonder in his ancient voice. In 300 years I have recorded the fall of 14 empires. Every one of them fell the same way, not to a larger fleet, to a moment when the frightened looked up and saw a choice, a pause. I did not expect the 15th to arrive carrying tea. The speaker was quiet for a long, long time. And then, slowly, he did the thing I had hoped he would do, the thing that takes more courage than any battle, the thing that an empire built on fear can almost never do. He asked a real question. Then what? The speaker of the grand conclave of the Korati Imperium said, to the small human sitting cross-legged on his floor. Do you suggest we do instead? And I knew in that moment that there would be no war. But I did not let myself smile. Because the hardest part of any negotiation is not winning. It is what you do in the silence right after the other side stops fighting. That is where deals are saved or lost. That is where you have to be more careful than at any other time. So I poured the last drops from my thermos, found it empty, and set it gently on the floor between us, dent up, smiling at us both. I am glad you asked, I said, because I have an idea, and it does not require a single ship to move. Let me tell you about a door. The speaker waited. The whole hall waited. I had their attention now in a way I had not had it when I walked in, and the difference was everything. When I walked in, they were watching a problem. Now they were watching a man who might be holding the only key to a room that was slowly filling with water. An empire built on fear is a closed fist, I said. You taught me that this morning, though you did not mean to teach me. A fist is strong, but a fist cannot hold anything. It cannot carry water. It cannot pick up a child. It cannot shake another hand. The moment it opens to do any of those things, it is no longer a fist. And so an empire like yours can never open, because the day it opens, it stops being what it is. You have been a closed fist for 1,000 years, and it has cost you nothing, because no one ever offered your vassals an open hand. I let that picture sit in the room. I have learned that a good picture does more work than a good argument. We offered the open hand, I said, quietly, for years, and now your fist is cramping, speaker, because a fist held too long always does. So here is my idea. And I want to say first that it is not a surrender, because my people are not surrendering, and it is not your surrender either, because I am not asking you to lose. I am offering you the one thing your arithmetic cannot give you, a way to stop holding the fist without dropping the empire. Go on, the speaker said. A door, I said, not a wall. The Helios corridor stays exactly where it is, but it stops being a thing that one side owns and the other side takes. It becomes a door. Open. Watched but open. Humans trade through it. Korati trade through it. The Velith Reach trades through it. And the domains of Anu and the Spindle worlds, all of them freely in the open, at fair prices, like people who have decided to stop being afraid of each other. The murmuring started again in the rings, but it was different now. It was the murmur of beings turning an idea over, not the murmur of beings preparing to attack. You will say this weakens you, I went on before the speaker could. It does not. Think carefully. Right now, the Spindle worlds send you a third less grain than they did 40 days ago, and they send it grudgingly, and they dream of the day they can stop. That is what fear buys you. Resentment and shrinking numbers and 10,000 harbor masters waiting to be the next Corin Hale. I held up one finger. But a world that trades with you freely, fairly, at a good price, has a reason to want you to prosper. A trading partner does not dream of your fall. A trading partner is ruined by your fall. Open the door, speaker, and the same vassals who are slipping away from you become the people who most need you to stay strong, because their grain now has a buyer, and their metal now has a market, and you are part of it. You do not lose the regions. You lose only the fear. And the fear, I think you have noticed today, was never really yours. It was only borrowed, and the loan has just been called in. Loremaster Veth spoke from the dark. He describes the trade leagues of the old Anu, the historian said softly, before the Imperium. They held together for 900 years without a single fleet of conquest. I had thought the records were exaggerated. A long pause. I begin to think they were not. The speaker turned his golden face toward me, and for the first time he looked at me not as a problem, and not as an enemy, but as something far more dangerous to an old enemy. He looked at me as a possibility. "And what do the humans gain," he said, "from this open door? You did not fly 9 days and drink tea on my floor for the good of my empire, ambassador. No one is that kind. What is your price?" It was the right question, and I had been waiting for it, because the answer was the truest thing I would say all day. "We gain the door," I said, "that is all. We gain a galaxy where the next time a freighter breaks down over a spindle world, no one has to wait for permission to help it. Where the next time a sickness empties a school on some world named Eshen, a doctor can simply land and get to work without breaking a law. Where a harbor master named Corin Hale can feed his own children without being afraid. We do not want your world, speaker. We are catastrophically bad at holding worlds. We want a galaxy where it is easier to help than to take. That is the entire human plan. It has always been the entire human plan. It is so simple that empires never see it coming because they are looking for armies, and we showed up with grain." The speaker was silent for a long moment. "You make it sound like generosity," he said. "But it is also conquest, a softer conquest. You will fill my regions with human kindness until the vassals love you more than they fear me, and then the empire will be yours in everything but name." I did not flinch from it, because he was not entirely wrong, and a lie now would have ruined everything. "Perhaps," I said, "or perhaps the empire stops being anyone's and starts being everyone's, and the question of whose it is simply stops mattering. That is the thing about an open door, speaker. You cannot own a door. You can only walk through it in both directions. I am not offering to take your empire. I am offering to end the kind of thing an empire even is. And I understand if that frightens you more than my 1,100 ships ever could. It should. It is a much bigger thing than a fleet." The hall was utterly still. And then a voice came from the rings, a new voice, young and sharp, from somewhere down low and near the front. "And if we refuse," the young Korati said, "if we decide that an empire that cannot frighten its vassals is no empire worth having. You said it yourself, human. We have 40,000 ships. You have 1,100. The door is a fine speech, but speeches do not stop fleets. Why should we open our hand when we could simply close it tighter?" I turned toward the young voice. I always turn toward the one who wants to fight, because that one needs to be answered most carefully of all. "What is your name?" I asked. "I am Subspeaker Callan," the young one said, "and I am not afraid of tea." "No," I said. "You are young. The young are rarely afraid of the right things." I said it gently, without insult, the way an old man can say it. "Let me answer you honestly, Callan, because you asked an honest question. You could close the fist tighter. You could ignore everything I have said. You could send your 40,000 ships out to remind 3 regions to be afraid." I stood up from the floor slowly, my knees complaining, and I dusted off my trousers. "And here is what would happen," I said, and my voice did not rise because the truth never needs to be shouted. "You would win, for a while. You would burn a world perhaps to make the point, and the grain would flow again out of fear for a season, and the metal. And you would tell yourselves you had solved it." I looked around the rings at all of them, the old and the young, the certain and the wavering. "But every world you frighten back into line," I said, "would remember. They would remember the human who came when they were dying, and they would remember the empire that came when they were healthy to take. And the next time it would not be 1 harbor master in Velith. It would be 10. And the time after that 100. You cannot frighten your way back to 1,000 years ago, Callan, because 1,000 years ago your vassals had never seen the open hand. Now they have. You cannot make them unsee it. That is the one thing not even 40,000 ships can do." I walked a few steps toward the center of the room, into the pool of light beneath the place where the ceiling stopped. "You can close the fist," I said, "and you will spend the next 100 years watching it cramp and bleed and slowly come open one finger at a time in pain against your will. Or you can open it yourself today, while it is still your choice, and call it wisdom instead of defeat. Those are the only two doors in this room, Callan, and only one of them lets you keep your dignity." The young sub-speaker had no answer. I did not need him to. I had not been speaking to him. I had been speaking to the whole hall, and the whole hall had heard. The speaker rose again. And when he spoke, it was not to me, and not to Callan. It was to the rings, to his own people, in the formal chime of the conclave. "The loremaster will pull every record," he said. "The grain, the metal, the shipments held and the shipments lost, the world called Eshen, the moon they named, the harbor master called Corin Hale. I will see the true numbers, not the comfortable ones, and I will see them before the sun of this station sets." He paused. "And then this conclave will decide whether to send a fleet or to open a door. We will not decide in anger. We will decide as people who can count." He turned to me and inclined his great golden head, just slightly, a motion I suspected the conclave had not seen its speaker make in a very long time. "You have earned that much, Ambassador. You have earned an honest count." It was not yes, but it was the end of the fist, and in a room that had begun the morning with the word remove, the end of the fist was very nearly everything. I bowed back, lower than he had, because I could afford to, because the man who is winning can afford to be gracious, and the gracious win is the only kind that lasts. "Take all the time you need, speaker," I said. "I will wait. It is, as I mentioned, the thing I do best." I bent and picked up my dented thermos from the floor. "Though if someone could point me toward more hot water," I said, "I would consider it the first act of the new friendship between our peoples." And the grand conclave of the Korati Imperium, which had summoned a human to threaten him with the end of his species, laughed. Not the cold flute-wind laugh from the morning. A real one, surprised out of them. The laugh of beings who have just realized that the worst day they feared might turn out to be the best day they had had in 1,000 years. Loremaster Veth found me hot water himself. The oldest historian in the empire, carrying a kettle because he wanted, he said, to be in the records as the one who did. They counted for 2 days. I spent those 2 days in a small round room they gave me, with a window that looked out over the curve of the great ship and the stars beyond it. I slept. I had not slept properly in 9 days. And I called home, on the long delay, and I told my granddaughter that her thermos had helped save 11 worlds, and she did not believe me, which was correct, because it sounded ridiculous, and the most ridiculous-sounding things are very often the truest. On the morning of the 3rd day, they called me back to the conclave. The hall was the same. The rings, the pillars, the ceiling that climbed into dark. But the feeling in it was not the same, and I knew it the moment the great doors opened. A room has a temperature that has nothing to do with heat, and this one had warmed. I walked the 61 steps. I counted them again out of habit, but they did not feel as long this time. The speaker stood waiting, Loremaster Veth beside him, and the young sub-speaker Callan a little behind, his sharp young face unreadable. "We have counted," the speaker said. And I said, "And the loremaster was right," he said. "And you were right. The numbers do not lie, though for a long time we told them to. The fist is cramping. We felt it this morning when we tried to close it, and it would not close as it once did." He paused, and something passed over his golden face that I think in a human would have been the look of a man setting down a weight he had carried so long he had forgotten it was heavy. "We will open the door." The hall did not erupt. It was too large a thing for noise. It simply exhaled, all of it at once, a long breath 1,000 years in the holding. "The Helios corridor will not be surrendered," the speaker went on formally for the records. "Nor will it be held. It will be opened, watched by all who use it, owned by none. Humans, Korati, the Reach, the Domains, the Spindle Worlds, a door as the human named it. The first door the Imperium has opened in 1,000 years. He looked at me. We are calling it the Vance Accord, Ambassador, over my objection, because the Loremaster insists the records must name the one who carried the T, and the Loremaster, as I am learning, usually wins these arguments. I did not know what to say. For once in my long career, the listener had nothing prepared. So I said the true thing. My daughter made the tea, I said. The recipe, I mean, too much honey. I have made it her way every day for 5 years since I lost her because it is the only way I have left to keep her in the room with me. If you are going to name the door after anyone, name it after the people who made me. She made me, and her mother made her, and somewhere back there is a long line of soft, foolish, catastrophically kind humans who never built a single warship and changed the galaxy anyway. Name it after them. I only carried the thermos. The hall was very quiet. And then Loremaster Veth, 300 years old, keeper of the rise and end of 15 empires now, spoke into that quiet, and his old dry voice was gentle as a hand on a shoulder. The records will say, he said, that the Imperium threatened a human with war, and that the human answered with tea and with patience and with the names of people he had lost, and that the answer stunned the Grand Conclave into the wisest decision it had made in 1,000 years. A pause. It is a strange entry. I have written none like it. I find I am glad to be the one writing it. Sub-Speaker Callan stepped forward then, the young one, the one who had not been afraid of tea. He looked at me for a long moment with those sharp young eyes. I still do not fully understand it, he said. You came with nothing, no fleet, no threat, no power that I could see, and you have changed the shape of the galaxy in 3 days. How? How does a being with nothing win against a being with everything? I thought about how to answer him. He was young, and the young deserve a true answer, even when the true answer is hard. You think I came with nothing, I said, but I came with the only thing that has ever really moved history. I came with the memory of being helped. Every human who has ever fed a hungry world or fixed a broken ship or buried a stranger's child with tears in their eyes was standing behind me in this room, Callan, though you could not see them. I did not have 1,100 ships. I had a moon named for a doctor, and a harbor master who finally said no, and a freighter captain who stopped when she was not supposed to, and a granddaughter who dropped a thermos down the stairs and cried about it. That is not nothing. That is everything. You just have to live long enough and lose enough and listen hard enough to see that it was there the whole time. I picked up my thermos. The dent caught the light from the window. It still looked like a smile. You came with everything, I said gently, and you almost lost it all because you forgot the one thing the small and the soft and the catastrophically kind always remember. That fear ends, and gratitude does not. You can frighten a being for a year, but feed his children once and he remembers you for 100. I walked to the great window, and I looked out at the stars, the same stars that hung over Eshin and Velith Prime and the Spindle Worlds and 11 human colonies that would not, after all, burn. The Empire threatened war this morning, I said mostly to myself, though the whole hall heard it. And all I had to do was stay calm and tell the truth and offer a little tea. Behind me, the speaker of the Grand Conclave of the Korati Imperium, 8 feet of golden empire that had finally, after 1,000 years, learned how to open its hand, said the last words of the longest negotiation of my life. Then let us drink it, Ambassador, he said, all of us, together, and let the records show that this is how the door was opened. I turned from the window, and I poured. There was not nearly enough tea in one dented thermos for the whole Grand Conclave of the Korati Imperium, but that, in the end, was the entire point. A small thing, shared in the open, with hands held out instead of closed. We sent for more. We always do. That is the human plan. It always was. And it is so simple and so soft and so easy to laugh at that the empires never, ever see it coming. They only ever count the ships. They never count the tea.